this stands for the amount of times that I had to record this. This is my second time, so it's not too bad, but still, you know. What's going on, guys? My name is Micah David. I am a filmmaker and photographer that just talks about, you know, different cameras, tech, filmmaking, photography, things like that. So if you're interested in that stuff, then you're in the right place. So today, as you can see by the title, I am going to be talking about the new Sony A1 Mark II. Now, if you guys don't know already, the Sony A1 was Sony's flagship camera. Now, with the Sony A1 Mark II, this is their new flagship camera. And for some of you who are coming back here after a while, you guys may be a bit surprised. You're like, wow, Micah's talking about Sony? It is a change, so I'm for all. Every brand is a great brand, except Nike. So in this video, I want to introduce to you guys what the Sony A1 Mark II exactly is, the specs that it has, the type of build that it has, the price, justifying my thoughts and comparisons and everything. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. No more prolonging the process. So first off, the build and design of the Sony A1 Mark II. So the previous A1 have like a kind of smaller build than the Sony A1 Mark II. The Sony A1 Mark II, we got a bigger build, more chunkier and everything. It kind of shares a similar build to the A9 Mark III. You guys got to stay with me here. Sony has a lot of these A9s, A7R, A7R5, A7R5 III, or this and this. So yeah, you got to just stay with me. We're talking about the A1 Mark II. And with this new build comes a new button on the front of the camera near the lens mount, but we'll get to that in a minute and explain what it does. On the Sony A1 Mark II, we have that new 4-axis 3.2-inch tilting screen with 2.1 million dots. Yeah, 2.1 million dots. Sorry, I just need to adjust that. That was kind of bothering me. Yeah, and just exposure and everything. Anyways, now memory card slots, both the same. That has UHS 2 cards or a CF Express Type A card, and it's a CF Express 2.0, or yeah, I think it's 2.0. A lot of people were kind of disappointed that it was CF Express 2.0 instead of 4.0. CF Express 4.0 slots, meaning that it can allow up to write speeds of 5,000 megabits per second, and this allows the camera to be kind of future-proof in this sense. Now back to the button that I said that was on the front of the camera. This button is by default a speed boost button, but that's kind of useless considering the fact that the Sony A1 Mark II only goes up to 30 frames per second in burst mode. But we'll get to that later on in the video. So we did get some port upgrades with Ethernet going up to 2.2 gigabits per second and USB-C at 10 gigabits per second for faster file transfer. Now, battery life. I seen a video from Tony and Chelsea Northrup about the Sony A1 Mark II, and they were saying how when they're in a cold environment, the Sony A1 Mark II did kind of drain a bit faster from what I can recall. Ultimately meaning that it could be a possibility that when you're in a colder environment, the battery could drain a bit faster, which I never really thought of. I thought, if anything, it'll be in the hot environments, it'll drain faster. I don't really know. But fortunately, in the Sony A1 Mark II, we get a dual battery charger. So you can charge 2 batteries at the same time with relatively high speeds that it'll charge. So if that battery does drain fast when you're in that cold environment, luckily you have another charged battery right there waiting for you. And if you run out of juice with that battery, then you're out of luck. You know, go home. We have a viewfinder that features 9.44 million dots. Just think of it as better quality, hey. And with the viewfinder, we have some improved eye cups to enhance your experience when looking through the viewfinder. They have a small one, like a big soft one. But yeah, that's pretty cool. I never really heard of interchangeable eye cups with the viewfinder. Sony just gives you, the users, to really have enough customization options to really make that camera yours. Now on to the sensor and processor of the camera. In the Sony A1 Mark II, we have the same 50.1 megapixel full frame stacked BSI Exmor RS CMOS sensor. It is a very long name, and I feel like it's only going to get longer when time goes on. If you guys don't know what the Exmor RS sensor, whatever it is, pretty much is what Sony claims to be the world's first 35mm full frame sensor that has integral memory. Oh wait, the world's first 35 full frame stacked image sensor with integral memory. So yes, this was carried over from the regular A1, but it was tweaked with mid to high ISO performance, some AI stuff that I really want to dive into. But yes, I'm gonna burst the bubble right now. There is no global shutter in the A1 Mark II, as it should be. Forget global shutter. I understand that could be disappointing for some users, considering the fact that it is in the Sony A9 Mark III. But guys, really think about it. Do you really want a global shutter in a $6,500 camera? No, I think we're fine. I think we're fine. But for those of you who are wondering, no, it is not surprising that Sony uses the same sensor from their previous model. We've seen hints of this trend of using the same sensor in different models ever since the A7R II, from the A7R II to the A7R III, or from the A9 to the A9 II. But let me know though, do you guys see this as a con? Do you think that the A1 Mark II needed a different sensor from the A1? Now we finally get to the new processor inside of the sensor, which is the new Dual BIONZ XR processor. This is something that I'm really excited about because with this processor, we get a new AI chip inside. This results in things like advanced autofocus, subject tracking, AI noise reduction for JPEGs only. But I really enjoyed hearing about this because it's kind of crazy. It even could do like the way the improved autofocus or tracking works is that it would detect the subject and how it moves and kind of predict what move is going to take next. And that's how it gets its like superb tracking. Fortunately, this works in both photo and video. Ever since like ChatGPT and we started hearing more and more about this artificial intelligence stuff, the one thing I could not wait for is when it was going to start being implemented into cameras like this. So this is probably the first camera I would say that I really heard had such a big kind of emphasis on AI. Do you guys think that we're ever gonna get a camera that's heavily dependent on AI? Maybe some like other company, like a new company is gonna come up with the camera, or a company that hasn't been around for a while and they're just gonna come up with like a AI dependent camera or something. The world's first AI camera. But yeah, thanks to this new processor with its AI chip, we get improved tracking, 30% better in human tracking, 50% better in animal tracking. And the cool thing is that I can detect humans, cars, animals, whatever it is, without you having to manually switch autofocus mode. And with that, we have new customizable focus areas. So you can go extra small and extra large. You can create like a little window, only focus in this window. You can create like a row or a column, be like only focus in this column. Now, like I said before, the shooting speed with the A1 Mark II only goes up to 30 frames per second. I think the speed boost button is kind of useless considering the fact that we don't have much wiggle room with 30 FPS as the max. See, with the A9 Mark III, we go up to 120 frames per second, so we have more wiggle room to switch between stuff and to really boost up to the max. So honestly, you're probably better off using that C5 button on the front of the camera for another function. And on top of that speed boost button, you can't use it for drive mode. So you can't go from single shooting to continuous shooting. You have to manually switch between the two. And on top of that, according to Petapixel's article on the A1 Mark II, this 30 frames per second is for lossy RAW files. If you want lossless quality RAW files, you're gonna need to take a trip downtown to 20 frames per second. But something that is a good, kind of makes up for this 30 frames per second in a way, is the pre-capture capability. The really cool thing about the pre-capture ability is that it goes up to 1 second before you fully press down the shutter button. So up to 1 second before you fully press down on the shutter button, it can capture up to 30 frames per second. The Canon R1 only offers like 0.5 seconds pre-capture capability, and it's either enable or disable. You can't go below 0.5 or you can't go above 0.5, only 0.5. So if you kind of think about it, technically, you have to have those technicallys in there. We're technically getting 60 frames per second as far as our effort is concerned. Now let's finally get into the video features of this camera. We have the same 8K at 30 FPS, 4K at 120 FPS, and 1080 at 240 FPS. And all of these are at 10-bit 422. If you guys didn't know before, in the Sony A1 Mark I, we were just getting 10-bit 420. And for those of you who don't know what that 422 and the 420 is, this has to do with chroma subsampling. Chroma subsampling is pretty much the process of compression with the colors and the pixels. So just look at these two rows of 4 pixels. Now, if you have a 4:4:4 ratio of chroma subsampling, for every 4 pixels, each pixel will have its own color. Ultimately, this means that there is no compression happening in your video because each pixel has its own color. So now when we get into ratios like 4:20 or 4:22, this is where some video compression is happening. But aside from the chroma subsampling, we are getting some higher bitrate options with each of our video resolutions. Something I did hear with this 8K video that does 422, we are getting like kind of a 20-minute limit. It's not necessarily a limit. It's just that I heard it overheats around 20 minutes. Embarrassing. But this kind of does put a limit on things, not just like the fact that it overheats, but the other bitrate options and the resolution quality and everything. It kind of just makes the A1 Mark II feel like a photo camera that does video too. I guess at least for me, 8K isn't enough to impress me or to make a camera good. Like, just because it has 8K, it's a good camera? Really? Grow up. So yes, it does have minimal video upgrades from the A1 Mark I, but there's no new resolutions or frame rates. That I can understand if it was a con. Not really more resolution, because 8K, like, you don't need to do more than 8K, but other frame rates and stuff like that, we would have loved to see it. Now we get some better image stabilization in video mode. We're going from 5.5 stops in the A1 Mark I to 8.5 stops in the A1 Mark II, stops of stabilization. This, I believe, makes the A1 Mark II more accessible to handheld recording if you don't have a gimbal. And we also have some new framing, stabilization, and auto framing modes in video mode. Okay, now it's time to dive into my thoughts about the A1 Mark II. So now finally I want to go into a deep dive about my thoughts on this camera. Now here's my first question. Would you rather go with the A9 Mark III or the A1 Mark II? It's a question. Answer the question. Stop evading. Now, the A9 Mark III has that 24 megapixel global shutter, which seems to be like a huge selling point for some people. This global shutter comes with a lot of advantages, like no jello distortion effect. It could be better at capturing like flash sync and ignore some distractions when it comes to high speed or some sporting events, because it's a global shutter. The readout speed is the whole image, not just, you know, top to bottom. But this global shutter isn't the end all be all, okay? There are some disadvantages to having a global shutter. For example, it can reduce your ISO range, and it can also result in lower dynamic range. I mean, I always kind of felt it a bit off-putting when the global shutter is in this small camera. Maybe it's not a big enough package where it can compensate for some of these disadvantages. Not to say the A9 III is a horrible camera because of the global shutter. And the A9 III goes for around $6,000. Wait, let me research that just to confirm. Yeah, goes for around $6,000. Now on the A1 Mark II side, we have a 50.1 megapixel sensor, no global shutter, but improved autofocus, improved IBIS with 8.5 stops, and 8K and 4K with 422 10-bit, which could be a kind of minimal change unless you're really pixel peeping, but still, it could be nice to have. Except for the AI autofocus, I believe that could change your life probably. That's one of the things that, you know, on paper, it doesn't look that cool, but when you use it, it's gonna be really, really useful. If we're looking at choosing between these two cameras based on what they're used for, and I will say based off the specs and the features, it looks like they're mainly used for photography, maybe action photography or something of the sport, wildlife photography or something. Based off these things, I would probably go with the A9 Mark III. A global shutter could really come in handy with negating a lot of other distractions that's going on inside your frame. When it comes to Sony cameras, I really only hear people using the FX30 or the FX3. I only have one friend that has the A7R IV, but these are the people doing video first. So I could say that the A9 III is missing out some video features, or the A1 Mark II is missing out some video features. But when it comes to video, that's what we have the video line for, the FX30, FX3, FX6, stuff like that. I don't know all of Sony's cameras and all of the specs in all of Sony's cameras, but what I can tell you for the A1 Mark II, it's looking like a photo camera that has some video features. They just threw 8K 30 FPS on there because it's their flagship, and it's like just covering up the leftover hole in the wall. I definitely think this camera is a bit overpriced, $6,500. It's a bit crazy, but if you want a camera that's a good medium between photo and video, you can have other options to explore. Some of Canon cameras, depending on how you want it, are pretty good with hybrids. Or something that I heard a lot is something like the Nikon Z9, which I haven't looked into Nikon very much, but when I was writing this video and I looked at the Nikon Z9, this thing is crazy. Let's see, 120 FPS, 8K and 4K video, 45.7 megapixel sensor. Autofocus seems to be the world's best, it said. I mean, all that for $5,500, the price of the A1 Mark I. I'm gonna leave it at that. But the only question that's left is, why would I buy a Nikon? But I did hear someone say that the A1 Mark II could go head to head with the Nikon Z9. But something like the Canon R5 Mark II offers a 45 megapixel sensor with 40 frames per second burst shooting, surpassing the A1 Mark II in burst speed. Now, here's a question I wanted to bring up. Does the addition of the flippy screen and other usability upgrades justify an upgrade from the A1 to the A1 Mark II? If you have an A1 and you have no problem with it whatsoever, like you love everything about it, of course some minimum stuff that you may not like, if you like everything else, then yes, I think you'll be very glad to jump to the A1 Mark II. Because the A1 Mark II has some good things in it. The A1 Mark I for its time was a really big groundbreaking jump to this new camera. Now the A1 Mark II is out now to kind of keep it relevant still. For me, the A1 Mark II kind of feels outdated in a way with some new stuff to keep it relevant. Like an old car that you bought in hopes of modding it out because your friend says it has some potential, but it just ends up still being an old car that makes loud noises and has some new parts. If that's the situation you're in, I'm sorry for being so specific, but that's what the A1 Mark II feels like. If you love the A1 Mark I, then yes, I think it'll be justifiable for you to jump to the A1 Mark II. Though if I walk into your studio and I see you with the A1 Mark I and the A1 Mark II that you bought with your own money, I would be a bit flabbergasted. But if you're a hybrid shooter and you're looking at the A1 Mark II, I would kind of, steer your head away from it, because there are other cameras that has great autofocus and great megapixels, yet for lower the price than $6,500, which is crazy. Now, one last question. Is a pre-capture function in the A1 Mark II a game changer for wildlife and sports photography? Absolutely, I think so. One example to paint you the perfect picture of how this could incredibly help you in wildlife photography. Picture this, you're in a habitat of a very rare bird that's only seen hardly in some parts of the world. You see it, you get all sides, all angles of it. Now the last thing that you need is its wings. You need to see its wings spread out. And what better way to do that of when it's about to fly or when it is flying. So it's about to fly, it spreads out its wing and it starts flying, but you just now press that shutter button when it's in the air. But thanks to that pre-capture function, you were still holding down the shutter button, but it wasn't fully pressed until it was in the air. You would still get to up to 1 second of photos there that you can go based off of. So essentially, that pre-capture function could increase your quick reflexes. I think that the pre-capture function is really good and may not seem so good on paper, but when you use it, it'll be great. So that will be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoy my thoughts and the specs and the comparisons and everything. I hope you had a lot to go off of in this video when making your decision or just checking out the A1 Mark II. My goal of this video was to give you as much as possible, give you all the juice, some very informative details to help improve your perspective on the A1 Mark II. Feel free to share this video with your friends. Make sure you like and subscribe if this is the type of content that you're interested in. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. That bye kind of seemed weird. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'll just wait for you to leave. I'm not gonna leave first. Bye. Dude, there's like so much air going in my eyes for some reason. I just have to blink a lot. It's like I can't keep my eyes open for more than like 5 seconds or something. Like, sheesh. So if you guys see me just repeatedly, it's because I don't know why.